She was only 4 years old. A yellow sand bucket in her tiny hands, curls bouncing as she built a castle by the water's edge. 1 second, she was laughing under the sun at Virginia Beach. The next, she was gone. No scream, no trail, just silence, and a small bucket left behind in the foam. 20 years later, a young woman steps off a bus in Florida. In her arms, the same yellow bucket, its handle cracked, its sticker faded by time. And when her name is spoken, the world around her shifts. Because this is the girl everyone thought was lost forever. This is the story of parents who never stopped searching, of a daughter raised on lies, and of a truth buried for 2 decades, waiting to resurface with a single sand toy. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I read every comment, and I love seeing where each of you is joining us from. Summer of 2000 rose like any other in Virginia Beach, umbrellas crowding the shoreline, sunscreen in the air, and the Atlantic drumming a steady heartbeat. Linda and Michael Carter laid out a striped towel near the pier while their 4-year-old daughter Jessica scooped wet sand into a small yellow bucket with a cracked handle. The bucket had a faded sticker, blue waves, and the word sea breeze, half peeled by salt and time. "Stay where we can see you, Jess," Michael said, planting their cooler in the sand. His voice tried to sound casual, but it carried the tiny tremor of a parent measuring distance in heartbeats. Jessica nodded, curls frizzing with spray, and toddled toward the edge where thin foam hissed and retreated. A lifeguard's whistle chirped. Farther down, a radio spit out a late summer anthem. Linda fixed Jessica's swim strap and kissed the crown of her head. "We'll build the tallest castle today," she promised. "A fortress no wave can break." They started together. Jessica packed, tapped, lifted. The first turret slumped, the second held. The sun pressed warm against shoulders. Linda loved the ordinary chaos, the anonymity of a crowded beach where nothing bad could possibly happen in daylight. Michael walked to the boardwalk kiosk to buy charcoal for the evening barbecue, promising 2 minutes, 3 at most. Linda promised to keep Jessica within arm's reach. "Sea breeze," Jessica read, sounding out the letters on the bucket, like a secret word. "It's our word," Linda said. "You, me, and Dad." She squeezed Jessica's hand, then reached for the sunscreen again. Waves murmured. The fortress grew, 4 small towers, a moat traced by a plastic shovel, shells pressed like coins into the walls. Jessica hummed without a tune, the way children do when they feel utterly safe. And for a while everything was simple: heat, light, salt, and a yellow bucket catching the sun. A cloud wandered over the sun, thinning the light. Linda glanced toward the kiosk where Michael waited behind a couple counting quarters. She brushed a strand of hair off her cheek and turned back. 1 heartbeat, maybe 2, because sunscreen dripped onto the towel. Jessica had edged closer to the shore break, balancing the bucket with both hands. A woman with a canvas tote printed with small anchors paused nearby. "Pretty castle," she said, without looking directly at them. Jessica smiled the way she always did when adults noticed her work. "Jess, stay by the moat," Linda called, shading her eyes. Jessica pivoted, obedient, and set the bucket down where the moat curved. Her footprints filled with a sheen of water. The lifeguard's whistle trilled again, and a few heads turned toward teenagers, daring each other at the rocks. 2 minutes, Linda whispered, as much to herself as to the ocean. She reached for the water bottle, twisted the cap, took a long drink. When she looked again, the moat had blurred. Their 4 towers slouched like shoulders. The yellow bucket sat upright at the waterline, half filled with foam. "Jessica?" Linda's voice was too small for the wind. She stood. "Jess!" The beach sounded cruelly ordinary, laughing, splashing, an ice cart bell. Linda ran to the bucket and lifted it as if it might answer. Tiny shells clinked inside. "Have you seen a little girl, brown curls, blue swimsuit?" she asked a couple, under a striped umbrella. The woman with the anchor tote looked up as if startled, then away. Someone pointed toward the pier. Someone else shrugged. Michael jogged up with a bag of charcoal. "Where is she?" "She was right here." Linda's voice broke on the present tense. The lifeguard's mirrored lenses slid across them, then beyond, searching the world in silver. They combed the waterline, called until their throats scraped, flagged down the lifeguard, flagged down anyone. The simple beach shattered into 1,000 suspicious pieces, towels, faces, coolers, footprints, leading everywhere and nowhere. By the time the first patrol car rolled onto the sand, the sun had come back. The castle was gone. And where Jessica's small feet had been, the tide erased even their questions, leaving behind only a yellow bucket that no one wanted to hold. 20 years later, the young woman who steps out of a city bus in Jacksonville, Florida, carries the same yellow bucket, its cracked handle mended with clear tape, its sticker now a ghost of blue. Jessica Carter, 24, keeps the bucket tucked close to her side, the way other people guard purses or phones. Not superstition, not vanity. It's the one thing that never changed, even when her last name did. Nursing school fits her because it gives shape to worry. She likes pulse counts, numbers, routines. She likes that pain can be charted, assessed, triaged. In simulation labs, she moves with quiet precision. Gloves, alcohol wipes, breath steady. In real life, she folds inward, shoulders slightly hunched, voice low enough to make people lean in. The instructors call her careful. Patients call her kind. She rents a studio above a laundromat that rumbles like distant thunder every evening. The walls smell faintly of detergent and steam. At night, she studies dosage math and electrolyte charts at a wobbly table, the bucket on the floor beside her chair like a silent witness. When stress creeps up her spine, she hooks a finger through the taped handle and breathes until her pulse settles, a grounding ritual learned without ever naming it. The woman who raised her, Karen Sullivan, kept their world small. Short leases, new schools, cash for groceries. A polite smile that never quite reached the eyes. "Found you by the water," Karen said when Jessica was little. A bedtime refrain offered, without details. "You were alone. I kept you safe." Jessica grew up honoring that safety as if it were a contract. Don't ask, don't wander, don't pry at doors. And for a long time, she didn't. There is a softness to Jessica's defiance. She doesn't slam doors, she writes lists. In a spiral notebook she calls the ledger, she tracks the stubborn questions no one else seems to keep. Why no baby photos before age 5? Why did they move the week she asked about birth certificates? Why does the bucket make Karen's jaw tighten, like she's holding back a shout? Work at the student clinic gives Jessica a way to feel useful. She likes triage days, clipboards, questions, the comfort of clean routine. She asks about allergies and home meds with a voice that says, "I will not waste your pain." And when the clinic empties, she lingers by the window and watches the flat Florida light sink across the parking lot, the bucket's rim flaring briefly gold. On Saturdays, she takes the bus to the beach and sits with her shoes off, bucket between her knees, eyes on the seam where sky meets water. She doesn't play in the surf. She watches edges, lifeguard stands, the gap between windbreaks, the way a stranger's shadow can fall over a child's castle and swallow the sun for a second. It isn't fear. It's vigilance learned so early it feels like breath. Foreshadowing lives in her life like lint, small, clinging, easy to miss. The bucket sticker reads CEs, the middle letters lost to time. Once, idly, she searched the phrase on a public computer and found a tourist shop in Virginia Beach with the exact font. She closed the tab as if it could burn her. Karen's rules are gentle on the surface. No online strangers, no sending forms with your social. Please don't dig in the past, it only hurts. But rules are still rules, and when Jessica nudges them, requesting a state ID, asking the clinic about volunteer shifts that require background checks. Karen flinches, then recovers with a practiced, brittle laugh. At night, the laundromat drones. Jessica writes another line in the ledger. If I was found, someone must have been looking. She places the notebook under the bucket like a hidden foundation and turns off the lamp, listening to the distant spin cycle as if it could hum an answer. The first real crack opens on an ordinary Tuesday. A patient at the clinic, a retiree with a sun-leathered face, hands Jessica a laminated key tag. "Scan me in, sweetheart," he jokes. The barcode reader chirps. His name pops instantly into the system. Data is a map, she thinks. If you have the right key, doors open quietly. That night, the ledger becomes bolder. Obtain birth record. Compare dates. Track earliest address. She knows exactly where to start because nursing school has already taught her how to request medical records, how to navigate forms without tripping alarms. She prints a vital records request and stares at the box that asks for mother's maiden name. She leaves it blank, folds the paper, places it under the bucket, her superstitious way of asking for courage. When she was 11, Karen told her they were moving one last time. They left in the middle of the week. Jessica remembers how the kitchen smelled like paper, boxes, and dust, how Karen shoved a folder into her tote with small blue anchors. "Don't carry that old bucket around," Karen said then. Mild annoyance threaded through her voice. "People will think you're childish." Jessica held tighter. Years later, the tote appears again in Jessica's memory like a flare. She can see the anchors, can hear the folder's stiff corners scraping against something inside. She writes, "Anchor tote, folder." Why hide paper? The thought won't leave. Another night, the laundromat goes quiet early. Jessica drags a plastic storage bin from under her bed. Receipts, bus passes, the odd Polaroid of a birthday cake with 5 crooked candles. Tucked beneath the photos is a strip of Peer Photo Booth prints. Karen, years younger, facing the camera with a half smile. A boardwalk behind her that isn't Florida. In the corner of one frame, sun-faded but legible, a sign reads, "Seabreeze Gifts, Virginia Beach." She carries the strip to the sink like it's fragile evidence. Water beads on the laminate. The word Virginia won't blink away. She fishes the bucket from the floor, turns it in the bathroom light, and matches the font on its ghosted sticker to the sign in the photo, as if she were lining up a heartbeat strip. The letters sing the same. The next day at the clinic, a flyer hangs by the time clock. Free DNA Week, Community Health Fair. She stands very still, as if sudden movement might send the letters scattering. Free means no insurance, no questions she can't answer yet. She tears a tab with a number and folds it into the ledger. Karen notices the new quiet in Jessica and fills it with her own chatter. "You've always been my blessing," she says, while chopping carrots in their kitchenette. "Some things we don't talk about because they only cause pain." Jessica sets down the knife. "What's your maiden name?" she asks, aiming for casual. Karen's hand pauses mid-air, then resumes. "Sullivan," she says. "Same as always." She smiles too wide. Carrot coins tumble like orange punctuation across the cutting board. That night, Jessica writes Sullivan in block letters at the top of a fresh page. Beneath it, she copies the number from the flyer and the address of the health fair. Her handwriting shakes a little, but the line stays straight enough to read. On Saturday, she rides the bus alone. The fair smells like kettle corn and antiseptic. Volunteers in bright T-shirts wave her toward a table with swabs and envelopes. "Results in a few weeks," a woman promises, voice kind, eyes busy. Jessica slips her sample into the bin and walks back into the heat with a hollowness that feels like a door opening. She buys a lemonade she barely tastes. Across the street, a thrift store shows beach postcards in the window, boardwalks, piers, color-bled sunsets. A single card catches her eye, "Greetings from Virginia Beach." Someone long ago wrote, wish you were here in a careless loop. For the first time, the wish doesn't feel like a stranger's. Back in her studio, she lays the photo booth strip beside the bucket on the table. The stickers, ghost letters, and the window sign rhyme across time. A bus receipt flutters from the ledger and lands against the bucket's rim like a tiny white flag. Her phone buzzes on the table and skitters a few inches. An unknown Virginia area code lights the screen. She stares at the number until it stops ringing, then starts again. Detective Robert Hayes spoke with the patience of someone who had waited decades to make one call. His voice carried no accusation, only gravity. "I've been looking for you for 20 years. Jessica sat on the edge of her bed, bucket clutched between her knees. The phone pressed so tight, her hand hurt. "Virginia Beach," he said, letting the syllables land like evidence. "That's where you disappeared. You were 4. The word disappeared, knifed through her. Past bedtime stories, past Karen's gentle lies. "I need to see you, tomorrow if you can." She didn't answer right away. Laundry thumped below, the building's steady heartbeat. She whispered, "I thought she found me." The detective didn't rush her silence. "I know what you were told," he said, "but the truth has waited long enough." The next morning she rode the early bus, bucket hidden inside her tote. Jacksonville streets blurred into pine forest, then into stretches of highway where signs pointed north. Hayes met her at a diner off I-95, coffee cooling in front of him. His hair was more white than gray now, his suit off the rack but carefully pressed. "Jessica Carter," he said, standing to shake her hand, "or at least, that's the name your parents gave you." She flinched at parents. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, photocopied flyers with her 4-year-old face, curls frizzed by sea air, a smile crooked around missing baby teeth. "Missing child, Virginia Beach, 2000. Beneath it, last seen playing with a yellow bucket near the pier." The photo's colors had bled over time, but the bucket blazed bright. Jessica's throat locked. "She said she found me," she repeated, smaller this time. Hayes leaned in. "If she did, she never told us. She told no one." That night, Jessica sat at her wobbly table, flyers spread like broken glass. The ledger waited open. She wrote, "Not found. Taken." She underlined "taken" until the paper thinned. She scrolled the internet on her phone with trembling thumbs. Articles half buried under newer news. Toddler vanishes at Virginia Beach. Parents plead for help. Community rallies in search. She stopped on one headline, "Hope fades after weeks with no sign of Jessica Carter." Below, a photo of Linda and Michael. Linda gripping the missing poster, Michael staring hollow-eyed into the sand. The room tilted, her chest clamped. These weren't strangers. These were the shapes her face echoed every time she studied the mirror too long. Karen noticed. "You're quiet," she said at dinner, slicing meatloaf. "You've always been quiet. That's what makes you special." Jessica pushed food around her plate. "Why Virginia?" she asked suddenly. Karen's knife clattered against porcelain. "What?" "You took a photo once. Seabreeze gifts. Virginia Beach." "Why didn't you tell me?" Karen recovered quickly, but the smile came brittle. "We moved a lot. Maybe once, years ago. You're reading too much into things." She reached across the table. "Some things are better left where they are, Jess." But Jessica had already seen too much. Sleep came shallow and broken. Jessica dreamed of surf hissing against her ankles, of towers slumping into moats, of voices calling her name that she could not answer. She woke with the bucket pressed against her chest like a shield. The ledger lay open where her hand had scrawled in half-sleep. "Ask them. Find them." The next weekend she boarded another bus, this time heading farther north. Her pulse raced as the stops ticked closer to Virginia. The detective had given her an address, not her parents' home, but his office, small and sun-bleached near the courthouse. "Let me prepare them first," Hayes had said. His voice carried the weight of a man guarding fragile glass. On his desk he placed 2 envelopes. "Photos from the search," he explained. Jessica pulled out a snapshot. A beach at dusk, floodlights casting long shadows, officers combing sand with sticks. In the foreground, a plastic bucket sat half buried. The photo had been taken hours after she vanished. She touched the grainy rim of the bucket in the picture, then glanced at the real one on her lap. The sticker, the crack in the handle, identical. It was as if time had folded back on itself. Hayes rubbed his eyes. Your mother, Linda, she never gave up. She kept your room intact for years. Your father tried to move on, but I think he broke under the weight of waiting. His voice softened. Seeing you now holding that bucket, it's like proof against the cruelty of memory. Jessica asked, Why didn't anyone find me? Hayes's answer was simple and terrible. Because whoever took you blended in. We had no suspect, no vehicle, just a crowd, a moment, and then silence. That night, she returned to her motel with her thoughts snarled. She set the bucket on the desk and stared at it. It had outlived apartments, schools, states. It had been with her longer than any person. A witness disguised as a toy. She whispered, You were there before I even knew myself. The phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. She saved you. Don't ruin it. Jessica froze. She hadn't given her new number to Hayes. Only one person could have sent it. Her heart hammered as she typed back, Who is this? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. She dropped the phone and pressed her palms over her eyes. At dawn, she walked the streets of Virginia Beach, tracing the boardwalk. Tourists snapped photos near the pier. Children carried bright new buckets from souvenir shops. She passed a storefront with peeling paint, sea breeze gifts. Closed now, letters faded, but still legible. The font matched perfectly. She stood there until tears blurred the sign. The ledger's pages felt heavy in her tote. She wrote on the back of a receipt, Home. This is home. She folded it and tucked it inside the bucket. That evening she returned to the motel. The door to her room was ajar. Inside, the bedspread was rumpled, her bag slightly unzipped, but the bucket was still on the desk, waiting. She picked it up with shaking hands. On its rim, a smear of something dark glistened in the light. She touched it, sand, damp and fine, still clinging like it had just been lifted from the shore. But she hadn't been to the beach that day. Her throat tightened. Someone had been in the room, close enough to touch the one thing she could never let go. She dropped onto the bed, clutching the bucket, heart racing with the certainty that the past was not finished with her. Detective Hayes didn't hide his concern when Jessica told him about the motel break-in. He scribbled in a leather notebook, jaw tight. If Karen followed you here, she knows we're close to answers. His voice carried no panic, just the weight of unfinished duty. Jessica pressed the bucket against her knees. She texted me, said I'm not ready for the truth. Hayes studied her face. That's fear-talking. People who live with lies cling to them hardest when the truth's at the door. The next morning, he drove her to the archives building, a squat brick structure that smelled of paper and mildew. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, and a clerk wheeled out microfilm reels. Local press covered every inch of the case, Hayes explained. Together they cranked through headlines. Family devastated after toddler vanishes. Community volunteers comb dunes. Suspect sketch released, then retracted. Each headline pulled Jessica further into a history that felt like hers and not hers at once. One article stopped her breath. A grainy photo showed a candlelight vigil on the boardwalk. In the center, Linda Carter clutched the yellow bucket like a relic. The caption read, Mother holds last toy as search enters third week. Jessica traced the photo with her finger, feeling the ache of absence reversed. Her mother had clung to the same object she now held. A thread had stretched unbroken through 20 years, waiting for her to notice. They visited the police evidence room next. A plastic bin labeled Carter, Jessica. 2,000 contained items recovered during the search. Sun-bleached flip-flops, a towel patterned with dolphins, and another sand toy, a matching blue shovel. Jessica lifted it with trembling hands. The plastic had warped slightly, but it fit perfectly into the bucket. "Why didn't she keep this with me?" Jessica whispered. Hayes's brow furrowed. "Because she never meant for you to remember," he said. "A bucket alone feels harmless. A bucket and shovel together tell a story." That evening, Jessica returned to her motel and spread the flyers, the shovel, and the bucket across the bed. The objects looked like puzzle pieces pulled from a tide. She opened the ledger and wrote in capital letters, "2 toys, 1 erased." Her phone buzzed again. "Stop, or you'll regret it. No name, no number traceable." She snapped a photo of the screen and sent it to Hayes. His reply came fast. "We'll protect you. But you need to decide. Are you ready to meet your parents?" Jessica stared at the bucket until dawn, her pulse ticking like a metronome. The reunion was arranged quietly. Hayes drove Jessica to a modest house on a quiet street outside Norfolk, where Linda and Michael Carter still lived. The front yard held a maple tree planted the year Jessica was born, its branches now heavy with green. Jessica's hands shook as she carried the bucket up the walkway. Linda opened the door before Hayes could knock. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes hollowed by years of waiting. When she saw the bucket, her breath hitched. "Jessie?" The word was half prayer, half question. Jessica froze, every muscle taut. I think so." Linda pulled her into an embrace that trembled like glass. Michael appeared in the hallway, moving slower, suspicion carved deep in his face. He studied Jessica as if afraid she might vanish again. Finally he whispered, "It's her." "It has to be." For hours they sat in the living room, surrounded by photo albums, pages brittle with age. Jessica saw her toddler self frozen in glossy prints, same curls, same smile, same yellow bucket. The photos proved what her body already knew, but Michael's questions cut sharp. "How did she keep you hidden? Why didn't you come sooner? Did you ever think about us?" Jessica's chest ached. "I didn't know," she said. "She told me I was found, that no one wanted me. She never let me see beyond her version." Linda gripped Jessica's hand. "We never stopped looking. Every birthday, every Christmas, every summer, we left the porch light on, just in case." That night, as Jessica prepared to leave, she noticed a figure parked across the street. A car idled with headlights off. She caught only a silhouette in the driver's seat before it pulled away. Her phone buzzed again. "You're making a mistake." Hayes clenched his jaw when she told him. "It's Karen," he said. "She's circling. She knows we're closing in." Jessica wrote one more line in the ledger. "Truth is closer than fear." But as she closed the notebook, a darker thought pressed against her ribs. What if the truth breaks more than it heals? Detective Hayes laid the Polaroid on the table between them, the edges curling with age. Jessica stared at the image as though it might blink. She was 4, maybe 5, sitting cross-legged on a linoleum floor she didn't recognize. A yellow bucket rested by her side, half full of seashells. Behind her stood Karen Sullivan, younger, hair pulled back, smiling faintly at the camera like a woman proud of her child. "She took this," Jessica whispered, throat raw. Hayes nodded grimly. "And mailed it now, to rattle you, to remind you she still controls the story." He tapped the photo. "But this is proof. Proof you were kept, not found." Jessica felt her pulse climb. All the quiet years, the relocations, the vague explanations, the insistence that questions only brought pain, collapsed into this one piece of film. I was never lost, she thought. I was stolen. They moved quickly. Hayes petitioned for a court order, citing the DNA test Jessica had taken at the health fair. The results had arrived, a 99% match to Linda and Michael Carter. Science had sealed what memory and objects had already whispered. But the order alone wasn't enough. Karen had vanished from her Jacksonville apartment. The place was stripped bare, curtains gone, dresser drawers emptied, walls echoing. Only one object remained, the anchor-patterned tote bag slumped in a corner. Inside, Hayes found the folder Jessica remembered. Birth records torn from Virginia files, clippings of missing posters, even a lock of toddler curls taped to an index card. Jessica touched the envelope with shaking hands. She kept pieces of me like souvenirs. The deeper Hayes dug, the clearer the motive surfaced. Karen had lived 2 doors down from the Carters in 2000. She and Linda had once exchanged recipes, carpooled to the grocery store, even swapped babysitting favors. But beneath the friendliness grew something darker, an obsession. Karen told friends Linda didn't appreciate what she had. When Linda became pregnant with Jessica, Karen miscarried in silence. Envy fermented into fixation. "She didn't take you for ransom or revenge," Hayes said. "She took you because she wanted to rewrite her life, to live yours." Jessica sat rigid. Her memories of childhood birthdays, modest apartments, moves across states, suddenly reframed. They weren't the choices of a struggling single mother. They were the camouflage of a kidnapper afraid of being recognized. That night at Linda and Michael's house, Jessica laid the evidence on the dining table, the Polaroid, the tote, the folder. Linda pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling fast. Michael paced like a man whose world had been snapped in half again. "She was our neighbor," Linda whispered. "All those nights I sat on the porch waiting, she was tucking you into bed 2 streets over. I waved to her in the supermarket. I thanked her for helping with the search." Her voice broke. "God forgive me. I invited her into our house after you vanished." Michael slammed a fist against the table. "She watched us grieve while raising our daughter. 20 years. Stolen." Jessica gripped the bucket, knuckles white. "She made me believe I was abandoned." But the true Reviravolta arrived with a phone call past midnight. Hayes answered on speaker. Karen's voice crackled through static, calm, almost soothing. "I didn't steal her," Karen said. "I saved her." Jessica's stomach turned. "Save me from what?" "From them," Karen replied. "From parents who fought so loud the neighbors closed their windows. From a mother who wanted freedom more than she wanted a child. I was there when she wandered off. I picked her up because no one else did. I gave her the life they couldn't." Linda shouted at the phone. "You're lying," but Karen only sighed. "Ask Jessica. Ask her if she remembers crying in the dark while they screamed at each other. She does, deep down. That's why she's always been quiet. I was the only safe place she had." The line went dead before Hayes could trace it. Jessica's chest ached with confusion. Her ledger lay open on the couch. She wrote one trembling question. Did my parents fail me before she took me? Hayes refused to let Karen's accusation float unchallenged. He dug. He pulled 911 logs from that summer, interviewed neighbors again, and unearthed a draft CPS report that had never been filed because the responding officer found no evidence of neglect. The argument Linda and Michael had the week before Jessica vanished? About bedtime and sunscreen, not abandonment. The officer's note, now scanned and printed, read, "Home tidy, child bonded, parents appropriate, tearful, cooperative." He set the paper on the table in front of Jessica. "This is the record," he said gently. "Not perfect people, but present, loving." Jessica's pulse slowed a notch. "Then why do I remember crying in the dark?" Linda's eyes filled. "Because you were 4. Storms frightened you. Once the power went out, and you sobbed for an hour. We held you with a flashlight and sang until you slept." Memory shifted inside Jessica, like furniture set back on its right legs. A second break came from a retired kindergarten teacher, Eleanor Whitaker, who lived 3 streets from the Carters in 2000. Hayes found her in a small apartment that smelled of mothballs and lilacs. She remembered Karen vividly. "She came by the school playground that fall, Mrs. Whitaker said, tapping a careful finger against her teacup, "with a little girl she called Jess. I recognized the hair. I told her it wasn't safe to be here with all the posters up. She swallowed hard. She smiled and said, "Sometimes the safest place is where everyone is looking the other way." The teacher had written the exchange in her diary. The entry's date was 2 months after Jessica vanished. The diary page shook in the old woman's hands as Hayes photographed it for evidence. Piece by piece, the rewrite came undone. DMV records showed Karen applying for IDs in neighboring states under her maiden name. A Seabreeze Gifts receipt dated the afternoon of the disappearance placed her near the pier. A payphone record, the kind no one bothers to check anymore, matched the time of an anonymous tip that claimed a kind woman had handed a found child to some beachgoer. The coin trace linked back to a booth behind the souvenir shop. And then there was the bucket itself. Linda brought out a photo from the morning Jessica disappeared. Michael, crouched by the towel, etching JC under the bucket's rim with a car key after another child nearly walked off with it. "I was so smug about the idea," Michael said, voice raw. "Mark your things, keep them." Hayes slid on a pair of gloves, angled a flashlight, and tilted the bucket. There, shallow but unmistakable, were the letters JC worn soft by time. Jessica exhaled a sound like a laugh and a sob tangled together. Karen hadn't bought her a similar toy. She had taken the original and carried it across every state line. "Why keep it?" Jessica whispered. "Because she couldn't erase your first story," Hayes said, so she tried to own it. 2 days later, a key arrived at Hayes's office in an unmarked envelope, taped to a note written in a neat, unhurried hand. "If the truth matters, open Unit 47, come alone." The key matched a storage facility near the bus depot, paid in cash for years, under a false address. Hayes didn't go alone. He moved with a small team, Jessica trailing him, palms damp around the bucket's taped handle. Unit 47 yawned open on the stale air of sealed years. Boxes stacked in disciplined rows. On top, a television with a VCR balanced like a relic. Hayes slid a box, lifted a VHS cassette labeled in blue ink. Boardwalk, summer. Jessica's knees turned to water. "Play it," she said. Static, then sun. The camera wavered past the pier, past a castle half-built, then steadied. The view swung to a woman and a little girl. The woman, Linda, bent to tie a strap. The girl, Jessica, patted wet sand, the yellow bucket tipping tiny shells into a moat. A second woman stepped into frame, holding a canvas tote printed with small anchors. She crouched, said something the mic didn't catch. Linda stood to wave at the camera, at Michael behind it, then turned her head toward the boardwalk. Just one distracted, human second. The anchor tote woman's hand reached toward Jessica. The picture jumped, blurred, then settled on the pier horizon. When it tilted back, the girl and the woman were gone. The bucket sat at the surf's edge, catching foam. Hayes froze the frame. The room swallowed its own sound. Jessica pressed her fingertips to the screen as if heat might bleed through. The tape didn't show a van, a tussle, a scream. Only the almost nothing of an ordinary afternoon turning into 20 years. Behind them, an interior door they hadn't noticed was latched with a slide bolt. Hayes flipped it open. Inside, a narrow closet hung costumes of a life stolen, preschool drawing signed with a name that wasn't hers, birthday hats, a faded first day of school sign lettered Jessica Sullivan, K1, forged clinic forms, an envelope of Polaroids labeled by age. Karen had cataloged a childhood the world believed vanished, archivist of her own crime. Jessica reached for the photos and stopped, breath hitching. One showed Karen at the candlelight vigil weeks after the disappearance, shoulders hunched, eyes swollen. In the bottom corner, half out of frame, the anchor tote. She had stood among grieving neighbors with her hands wrapped around the instrument she used to take a child. Hayes's phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Do you see now? I kept her safe when you didn't." He grimaced. "She's watching us." he replied from a second line only he used. "Come in, Karen. Tell it yourself." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then the phone rang, speaker on. Karen's voice, soft, disturbingly level. "You found the locker," she said. "Good. Then you understand this isn't simple." "You filmed the abduction," Hayes said. "That's as simple as it gets." "Abduction?" Karen laughed, a small, tired sound. "I filmed a moment because I knew they'd twist it. I wanted a record, how she was alone. How the tide was reaching, how no one was watching." Linda's voice broke through the speaker. "I was right there. I turned for 1 second." 1 second is all it takes," Karen said. "I became the mother she needed in the other 1,000,000 seconds after that." Jessica held the bucket like it could steady the spin of the room. "If you believed you were right," she asked, voice quiet, "why run?" Karen inhaled. "Because right doesn't always win." A beat, then, "Meet me at Seabreeze at sunset." "No police, just the 3 of us. Bring the bucket. You'll finally hear everything." The line went dead. Hayes cursed under his breath. "She wants a stage." He looked at Jessica. "We can control it. We wire the place, keep distance, move in the second she shows." Jessica nodded, the kind of nod that happens when a choice is no longer a choice. "I'm done being a story someone else edits." Sun bled into the Atlantic like a slow bruise. Seabreeze Gifts stood shuttered and fading, gulls stitching the sky above it. Linda and Michael waited in a car a block away with a plainclothes officer. Hayes tucked a mic under Jessica's collar, adjusted the tiny camera clipped to the bucket's taped handle, and stepped back into shadow. Footsteps approached along the boardwalk. A woman in a plain blue dress, hair pulled tight, anchor tote on her shoulder. Karen's face in real life was smaller than the memory of it, but her eyes, bright, certain, matched perfectly. She stopped 2 paces from Jessica. For a long moment neither spoke. The bucket's cracked handle creaked in Jessica's grip. Karen glanced at it and smiled, fondness and something like pride bending her mouth. "You kept it," she whispered. Jessica swallowed. "I kept what was mine." Karen lifted her gaze to the horizon, then back. "Then let me give you what's yours," she said, sliding a small brass key from her pocket into Jessica's palm. "It opens something I've never shown anyone." "Another locker?" Hayes's voice murmured in Jessica's ear. "Ask what? Keep her talking." Jessica tightened her fingers around the key. "What does it open?" Karen's lips parted to answer, then her eyes flicked past Jessica's shoulder. A shadow shifted. Somewhere a gull barked, and the pier groaned. Karen's expression changed, resolve calcified into fear. "You brought them," she said calmly, stepping back. "Then you're not ready after all." She turned fast, disappearing into the knot of tourists gathering for sunset, blue dress dissolving into blue dusk. The brass key trembled in Jessica's palm as Hayes slid it into the bank's safe deposit lock. Inside the narrow metal box lay a small leather journal, a stack of Polaroids, and a folded letter yellowed with age. Jessica lifted the journal first. Her own childhood scrawl covered the first pages, shaky letters spelling Jess, beside uneven suns and stick figures. "She made me keep a diary," Jessica whispered, "said it would help me remember. But these aren't my words. She dictated them." Hayes leaned closer. Each entry praised Mommy Karen, painting her as savior, protector, only family. A manufactured childhood preserved like scripture. The Polaroids were worse. They showed birthdays staged in tiny apartments, candles glowing over cupcakes, Karen's hand always guiding Jessica's shoulder. In one photo, Jessica spotted the corner of a missing poster tacked to a laundromat wall, half hidden by balloons. The irony made her stomach twist. Finally, the letter. Karen's handwriting curved in deliberate loops. "If anyone finds this, know I loved her more than they ever could. I didn't take her. I rescued her. If she goes back, it's because lies sound prettier than truth." Jessica's hand shook so hard the paper rattled. She turned to Hayes. "She stole my life and calls it love." Back at the Carter house, Linda traced the ink of her daughter's forged diary with trembling fingers. "She rewrote you," Linda whispered. "Every laugh, every word. She tried to replace us." Michael sat rigid, jaw set, fighting decades of rage. "She didn't just steal our daughter, she stole her voice." Horror. Jessica broke then, tears rushing, words tumbling. "I don't know who I am. I don't know which memories are mine. I look at her and feel safe. I look at you and feel empty. I don't know how to come back from that." Linda gathered her close, pressing Jessica's forehead to hers. "You don't have to come back all at once. You just have to come home." The trial preparations began. Prosecutors pieced together the storage unit, the Polaroids, the DNA. Jessica sat through interviews, each question slicing another layer. Did she ever hurt you? Did she ever mention the Carters by name? Each answer complicated the shape of love and crime. At night she sat by the maple tree in her parents' yard, the bucket between her knees. Fireflies winked around her. She whispered to the tree's bark, "You grew while I was gone. You held space for me." The bucket caught dew, glowing faintly under the porch light Linda still left burning. But Jessica's heart cracked fully the night before the hearing, when Karen's attorney delivered a handwritten note smuggled through channels. "You may sit with them now, but you'll remember who fed you, who sang you to sleep. The truth is not what they told you. The truth is what you lived." Jessica folded it slowly, then set it inside the bucket. For once it didn't feel like a relic of safety. It felt like a cage she was ready to break. The courtroom smelled of varnish and nerves. Jessica sat behind the prosecution table, her bucket under the chair like a loyal witness. Across the aisle, Karen Sullivan entered in a plain suit, her hair tied back as if neatness could erase years of flight. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Jessica felt the confusing surge, love, fear, anger, colliding in her chest. The prosecutor opened with evidence: DNA, the Polaroids, the VHS tape. Each artifact turned the room heavier. Hayes testified with steady resolve. "I investigated this case for 2 decades. What we see here is not a rescue. It is a kidnapping carried out in plain sight." Then came Linda. She clutched the missing flyer with Jessica's toddler photo, her voice trembling. "Every night I prayed for her. Every morning I woke to her empty bed. She was not abandoned. She was stolen from us." Michael's testimony was shorter, but iron-edged. "She didn't just take my daughter. She took my wife's laughter. She took our family's peace. She doesn't deserve to call it love." When Jessica was called, the room hushed. She walked to the stand holding the bucket, set it gently on the wood. Murmurs rippled through the benches. She spoke softly, but the microphone carried her words clear. "This bucket was mine before I knew what mine meant. My father marked my initials on it. My mother held it at vigils when I was gone. And Karen carried it across every state line to prove to herself I belonged to her. But I know now, I belonged here, all along." Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. "She gave me food, a roof, rules, but she also gave me lies. She built a childhood out of stolen pieces and told me it was truth. And that's why I'm here, not because I hate her, but because love without truth isn't love. It's captivity." Linda wept openly. Even Michael's jaw trembled as he pressed a hand to his mouth. The defense tried to paint Karen as misguided, not malicious. She believed she was protecting a child, her lawyer said. But the jury saw through it: the Polaroids, the locker shrine, the forged diaries. Evidence didn't bend under sentiment. After hours of deliberation, the verdict landed: guilty. Karen lowered her head, no tears, no outburst, just the hollow calm of a story slipping from her grip. Jessica felt something uncoil inside her, not joy, not closure, something smaller but steady. The first stone laid in a foundation of her own making. That evening, the Carters gathered in their living room. Linda brewed tea. Michael placed old photo albums on the table. Jessica sat between them, bucket by her side, and for the first time allowed herself to leaf through page after page, birthdays she couldn't recall, holidays she had missed. She pointed to one photo of her toddler self grinning at the beach. "I don't remember that day," she admitted. Linda smiled gently. "Then we'll remember it for you, until you can make new ones." Jessica leaned back, letting the warmth of her parents' voices weave into the silence that Karen had filled with lies. The porch light glowed outside, no longer a beacon for the lost, but a welcome for the found. Later, alone in her room, Jessica placed the bucket on the nightstand. For the first time she noticed the faint etching of her initials, J.C., carved by a father's car key 20 years ago. Proof that she had always belonged, no matter how far she had been carried. She whispered to the dark, "I'm home." And the word felt true. Morning in Virginia Beach carries a different sound once you stop listening for what's missing. The Atlantic still keeps its steady drum. Gulls still scribble the sky, but Jessica hears something new between the waves. A life beginning at ordinary volume. She walks the boardwalk with Linda and Michael a week after the verdict, pausing where sea breeze gifts sit shuttered like a set from a story they've already told to the end. No need to open it again. Some doors prove their point simply by staying closed. They buy paper cups of coffee and share a cinnamon roll the way families do when they've run out of bigger occasions to consecrate. Michael jokes about the sticky icing, then catches himself. Decades trained him to measure joy for signs of breakage, but nothing cracks. Jessica smiles and lets the sweetness anchor to a new memory that belongs to no one but them. Back home, the maple tree throws slow green shadows across the lawn. Linda brings out a shoebox labeled Firsts. First shoes, first lock of hair, first crayon drawing, emptied and refilled over the years with hope instead of objects. "We kept the box anyway," Linda says, laughing softly at the superstition. Jessica adds her own first to it, a folded page from the ledger with every question crossed out. She writes at the bottom, small and neat, "Not everything has to be solved to be true." The bucket sits on the porch railing, initials J.C. faint but persistent. For 20 years it was a witness. Now it's just a bucket again. Useful, ordinary, good. Jessica considers throwing it away and decides against it. Keeping it isn't surrendering to the past. It's refusing to let the past dictate how the present feels. She presses her thumb to the etched letters like a quiet ritual and carries it inside. She returns to nursing school, not because she needs distraction, but because the work itself answers a deeper vow: to meet pain with clarity. On a slow afternoon in the student clinic, she teaches a nervous kid how to breathe through a blood draw, counting, explaining, never lying about the sting. Truth is the only anesthesia that doesn't wear off, she thinks, surprised by her own certainty. That night, she and Linda sort photographs at the dining table. When they reach an empty sleeve labeled Summer 2000, they leave it empty on purpose. "We'll fill it," Linda says, "not with what we lost, but with what we do next." They write Summer 2025 on a fresh sleeve and slide in a picture of the three of them under the maple tree, the porch light glowing behind them, even though it's still daytime. Habit turned into choice. On a Sunday, Jessica takes a small drive alone and stops at the public library. In a quiet corner, she opens a blank notebook, not the ledger, not a place for injuries, and writes a different kind of list. Call Mrs. Whitaker on her birthday. Learn Michael's barbecue rub exactly. Take Linda to the craft fair she missed in 2001. Swim once without counting the exits. Build one sandcastle. Let the tide erase it and go for ice cream anyway. Each line feels like a plank on a footbridge that didn't exist yesterday. She closes the notebook and notices her reflection in the window, older than the child on the flyers, younger than the grief that raised her. She doesn't look like a mystery anymore. She looks like a person on a timeline that finally points forward. That evening, she returns to the shore, not the pier where headlines were born, but a quieter stretch where families fold blankets at dusk. She carries the yellow bucket because she wants to, not because she must. A little boy watches her kneel and pack damp sand into a mold. "You're doing it wrong," he says with absolute 6-year-old authority, then shows her how to tap the sides and lift slowly. The turret holds. They laugh for no reason that needs defending. Linda and Michael arrive with lemonade. They don't hover. They don't measure the distance between safety and trust. They sit and listen to the water like people finally free to run out of words. When the first wave licks away the moat, Jessica doesn't flinch. She smooths the wall with her palm and lets the tide teach her the old lesson under a kinder light. Every sturdy thing still learns how to be remade. On the way back to the car, she pauses where the foam thins into lace and turns to the ocean. The wind lifts strands of her hair. She thinks of porch lights and courtrooms, of keys pressed into palms and names pressed into plastic, of a detective who refused to file hope under cold case. She thinks of two mothers, one who waited with a bucket like a candle, and one who mistook possession for love, both parts of her past, neither the author of her future. As they reach the boardwalk, a lifeguard's whistle chirps. For a flicker, the world overlays itself, towel, castle, anchor tote, the almost nothing of a second that took 20 years to repair. Jessica squeezes the bucket handle and exhales. The sound resolves back into the present. Back home, she places the bucket on the porch again, under the steady porch light that no longer signals a vigil, but a welcome. Inside, she tapes a new photo to the fridge, 3 figures laughing around a lopsided sandcastle, lemon stains on paper cups, a bright smear of evening behind them. Under it, she writes "Home" in block letters. Before bed, she opens the fresh notebook and adds a final line beneath her list: "Return to the beach next week. Bring a new bucket. Leave this one on the shelf." She smiles, turns off the lamp, and lets the house sleep around her. Outside, the maple sways like it's nodding along. The ocean, miles away, keeps its heartbeat steady. And the story that began with a yellow bucket catching foam ends with the same bucket catching light, proof that sometimes the smallest things carry us safely from one shore to the next.